One of the most important mountains in the entire Bible is Mount Sinai, and the most popular belief is that this mountain is in Egypt in the Sinai Peninsula, but there's evidence that suggests it's in a completely different area. In this video, we will look at the evidence to try to determine where is the true location of Mount Sinai. In Exodus 19, after the children of Israel flee Egypt, it tells us that they're camping at Mount Sinai from this point for the rest of Exodus all the way until Numbers 10. This is one of the most important places not only for the Christian belief system, but also for the Jewish people and Islam. This is the location where all of those religions believe that Moses received the 10 Commandments. The current widely accepted belief is that Mount Sinai is also known as the mountain Jabal Maqla, and it's a mountain in the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt. On Wikipedia, it says that it's a moderately high mountain near the city of St. Catherine in the region that is known today as the Sinai Peninsula. We'll get back to that claim of it being a moderately high mountain later in the video. But to understand where Moses and the children of Israel fled, we can look at two verses that tell us where Moses went before when fleeing Egypt. In Exodus 3:1, it says, "Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the back of the desert and came to Horeb, the mountain of God." Exodus 2:15 says, "When Pharaoh heard of this matter, he sought to kill Moses, but Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well." These two verses tell us that Moses was in Midian, and where exactly is Midian? Well, it's in Saudi Arabia. And when we look at the geography and the evidence of the region of Saudi Arabia, we can see many locations that fit the biblical narrative of what was going on with Moses and the children of Israel after they'd fled Egypt. Much of this evidence was brought forth by Ron Wyatt and other biblical archaeologists. The mountain that is brought into the picture as the true Mount Sinai is Jabal Maqla. Jabal Maqla is located in the Jabal al-Lawz mountain range outside of the city of Al-Bad in Saudi Arabia. It's located approximately 80 miles east of the traditional Mount Sinai location in the Egyptian Sinai Peninsula. And what's incredible about this mountain when you see it, no, that's not a shadow cast on the top of it. It actually has a blackened top. And what's incredible about that is Exodus 19:18, which says Mount Sinai was covered with smoke because the Lord descended on it in fire. The smoke billowed up from it like smoke from a furnace, and the whole mountain trembled violently. Mount Sinai was the mountain that Moses would be on top of with God, interacting with God for days and weeks on end sometimes, with the cloud of God descending upon it this entire time, which makes this mountain Jabal Maqla truly incredible because it truly looks as if fire had descended upon this mountain. Flavius Josephus was a Roman Jewish historian, and he has a quote about Mount Sinai. He ascended up to Mount Sinai, which is the highest of all the mountains that are in that country, and it is not only very difficult to be ascended by men on account of its vast altitude, but because of the sharpness of its precipices also. Nay, indeed, it cannot be looked at without pain of the eyes, and besides this, it was terrible and inaccessible on account of the rumor that passed about that God dwelt there. Remember how Wikipedia, when mentioning the Mount Sinai in Egypt, said that it was a moderately high mountain, while this mountain in Saudi Arabia is truly one of the tallest mountains in the region, very hard to get to the top of, and also it would make sense with the blackened top, why the rumor would continue to go about that God dwelt up there. There's another mountain that archaeologist Emmanuel Anita claims is the true Mount Sinai, Har Karkam, and this mountain is in Negev. And while this mountain is closer to the northern region of Saudi Arabia, and that's extremely important because of a New Testament Bible verse that I'll get into in just a moment, but if we're looking at the claim of Josephus as the mountain being very inaccessible, very hard to climb because it's precipices, and if we look at this mountain Har Karkam, we can see that this mountain does not have high precipices. It does not look very challenging at all to climb. And if we believe the description from Josephus, who is someone who lived closer to the times of people who definitely had more understanding and passed down traditions of these mountains and these locations, then we can look at his description and this mountain and see that it does not fit the picture. What makes the location in Saudi Arabia so incredibly intriguing is two other locations that are found right by that mountain. In the story of Exodus 17:6, it says, "I will stand there before you by the rock of Horeb, strike the rock and water will come out of it for the people to drink. So Moses did this in the sight of the elders of Israel. And this rock in Saudi Arabia, right by the claimed Mount Sinai, looks exactly like the type of rock to fit that description. This is when the children of Israel were complaining that there was no water in the desert. Moses angrily struck the rock and the water gushed out. Truly incredible if this is the rock. It really looks like it could be. Numbers 20:11 tells us more about this. Then Moses lifted his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod, and water came out abundantly, and the congregation and the animals drank. And there's another location right by Jabal Maqla, or the mountain claimed Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia, where it looks like an altar could have been, where Aaron and the children of Israel set up the golden calf that they worshiped, while Moses was up on Mount Sinai receiving the 10 Commandments from God. We can see this looks like a natural formation of a type of altar, and within this area there's also petroglyphs, carvings on the rocks, and this valley right beneath this mountain is a large enough area where they could have held the 2 million Israelites and set up their tents for them to stay after they fled Egypt. And what really got me interested in Mount Sinai potentially being in Saudi Arabia is this verse in Galatians 4:24-25, which if it's not highlighted or you just don't notice it, you kind of overlook it, but it says, which things are symbolic, for these are the 2 covenants, the one from Mount Sinai, which gives birth to the bondage, which is Hagar, for this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia, and corresponds to Jerusalem, which now is and is in bondage with her children. So according to this verse, it sounds like Mount Sinai is in Arabia, or what we know today as Saudi Arabia. So the evidence is truly pretty amazing and fascinating that Mount Sinai and these locations for the Rock of Horeb and the altar beneath Mount Sinai could very well be at this location in Saudi Arabia. At the location that's currently believed by many to be Mount Sinai in Egypt, I wanted to point out that this was the same place that a few months ago there was a ceremony, the COP27, where they had a climate ceremony of breaking a new 10 Commandments, the new green climate 10 Commandments on the top of the Mount Sinai in Egypt, a very disrespectful and truly blasphemous act really of a mock ceremony of what happened with Moses and the 10 Commandments. I just want to play that clip in case you haven't seen it.
The whole world needs to cut our emissions by half by 2030, and they're not yet. We take these green commandments, we look down to Sharm el-Sheikh, and we're not satisfied.
I made a few videos on that I'll leave linked in the description if you're interested. Pretty interesting, and I thought worth referencing in a Mount Sinai video. But whether Mount Sinai is truly in Egypt or if it's in Saudi Arabia, it's interesting to know, and of course we want to know biblical history. But what truly matters is that Jesus Christ came to fulfill the law. He's the Messiah of the whole world, to the Jew first, the Greek, and the Gentile also. And it's important to accept Jesus as our Savior and Messiah because he truly is the fulfillment of the commandments that were given to Moses on Mount Sinai. In Mark 12:30-31, when someone asked Jesus, what's the most important commandment? Jesus said it's this, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. This is the first commandment. And the second like it is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There's no other commandment greater than these. Make sure you're loving the Lord your God with all your heart, with everything you have. God says to seek him first and everything else will come to you easily, because keep God first, the rest of life just makes sense. So it's important to do that and to love others the same way you want to be treated. These are very important. They're the most important commandments in the eyes of God. So keep this your focus as you go about your day and life. Let me know in the comments what you think. Where's the true location of Mount Sinai? Are these the locations, and which one do you believe it is? I pray you all are well. Thanks for watching, and God bless.